are in week 3 of our Wake My Heart series, where we are learning all about what it means for God to take our sleepy hearts and wake them up so that we want the same things that God wants. So if you are ready for today, I need to see both of your hands like this. We're going to connect them together to make a heart. And on the count of 3, I want to hear you guys say, Wake my heart. 1, 2, 3. Wake my heart. All right, let's jump in. All right, so last week we began Moses' story. We talked about Moses as a little tiny baby. His life was in danger, so his mom rescued him by putting him in a basket, sending him down the river, and he ends up on the footsteps of Pharaoh's palace and actually gets adopted into Pharaoh's family. So he goes from a life of being a Hebrew, where he's a slave, to a life of royalty in Pharaoh's home. He lived there for about 40 years, totally comfortable, totally loving life as a prince of Egypt, everything he could ever want, until one day something completely changed that forever. If you remember last week, we talked about Moses seeing a Hebrew man being beat up by a leader in the Egyptian world, and it broke Moses' heart. He couldn't stand to see what was happening. In that moment, God woke Moses up to the hurt all around him. Where he had been sleeping, God used that sight as a chance to wake his heart up. Now we know from what we learned last week that Moses didn't really respond in the right way, but God still had a plan for his life to help, so that Moses could help save the people from the brokenness around them. So in our centers last week, we got to learn a little bit about some of the brokenness in our own world, some of those same things that really hurt God's heart that are happening around us all the time. Hopefully you guys got to learn some of those things, and I'd love to hear what you learned. So I'm going to give you guys 1 minute. We'll put a 1-minute timer up, and you can share with each other in your class, what are some of the things happening in your world that hurt God's heart? Are you ready? All right, 1 minute, let's do it. Oh my gosh, okay, you guys are back. That minute went by so fast. You guys remember my friend Victoria, right? Can everyone say hi to her? Victoria and I get to work together at VoxKids. Isn't that awesome? I love it. It's a dream come true. For a long time, I worked all by myself at VoxKids. So when Victoria came to work here, it made my heart wake up and come alive to how fun it could be to work with your friends. So Victoria and I, when we have meals together or little breaks at lunch, we are always chatting. We always have something to say to each other.
Yeah, I love to tell Ketley about everything happening in my life. I like to tell her about good things and bad things. When things are scary or I'm asking God for something, I tell Ketley because we talk about those things. I know she prays for me and she's always there through everything that's happening.
And I tell her the same things going on in my life. But when we first met, it really wasn't that easy because we didn't know anything about each other. So what I did is I carried little note cards just like this around with me when I was going to meet up with her, and I had a couple questions about things I wanted to know about Victoria. And so when we get together, I would ask her a question on the card, like, tell me about your family. Now Victoria has about 100 brothers and sisters, so that took a long time for her to tell me all about her family. And when she told me, then I would tell her all about my family. And then when we moved to the next question, and that's how we got to know each other. And I'll never forget the day when I asked Victoria, what's a dream of yours? What's a really big dream you have? And she told me all about her dream to have a truck that makes grilled cheese for hungry people. And she would just go around feeding anyone who needed food a grilled cheese sandwich. I loved hearing all about that.
Yeah, and I remember when I first met Ketley, she was always talking to me about you. She was always telling me about how her dream was to work with you guys and teach you guys and know all about all of you guys who come to VoxKids. She would share about getting to learn with you on Sunday mornings, and she was always sharing that with me.
Yeah. And that's how Victoria and I got to know each other. Now when we talk, we don't need cards anymore. We just talk about our lives and what God's doing, what's happening with our friends and our family. It's so easy. And I know that those conversation starters we had in the beginning were the foundation. That means the first thing you use to build with on a friendship that's gonna last forever. So we hoped that today, maybe you guys could have a couple conversation starters with your friends in your class. So can everyone put your eyes on your teacher in the room? Go ahead, look for them, say hi, tell them they look great this morning. Your teacher's holding some cards just like this, and on the cards are some conversation starters. So what we would like you guys to do is find someone in your class that you don't know that well and ask them the question that's on the card. And once they answer, then they can ask you the question that's on their card. We're gonna give you guys 1 minute. Are you ready? Okay, go for it. All right, hopefully you guys had some great conversation starters. Hopefully those are the start to some lifelong friendships that you started right here at VoxKids, just like Victoria and I did. So we want to jump back into our story with Moses, and today we're actually going to talk about a really important conversation that Moses had. So remember we left off last week where Moses fled Egypt. He had just done something awful. He had killed a man in response to his heart hurting because of what was happening to the Hebrew guy, and he just couldn't stand to live the life he was living anymore. So he chose to run away. And Moses landed in a place called Midian. Can everybody say that with me? Midian. Now the Midianite people were a nomadic tribe. That's not really a word we use much here in New England, but nomadic means they don't really have a home. They kind of travel all over. So the Midian people would travel from place to place, and they didn't really have a land that was their own. And Moses began to feel really comfortable in that place. It's actually where he met his wife, Sephora. And we're going to hear more about his family next week. So, because today I want to talk to you a little bit more about this really important conversation that he had. Okay, so Moses is with his new family. He's got a wife, he has kids, he's working for his wife's husband, and his life is really great. One day, he's out in a field, he's taking care of some sheep, and he notices something off in the distance that catches his eye. He notices a bush that's on fire. So he gets a little bit closer, like, I'm gonna investigate this. I don't know why one bush would be on fire. So he gets a little bit closer to the bush. And as he gets closer, he realizes that the bush is completely covered in flames, but it's not actually burning, which was totally crazy because I don't know if you guys know, but if something catches on fire, especially a tree or a branch, it burns right up and then the fire goes away. That's not what was happening here. It was completely covered in flames, but the bush wasn't burning. So as Moses gets closer, he actually sees an angel in the flames. And the angel catches his curiosity again, so he gets closer and closer, like, I gotta see what's really going on here. I know if I were Moses, I don't know if I'd want to get closer or move further away, but Moses wanted to get closer and closer, and as he did, he heard the voice of God, the real, audible, that means he could hear it with his ears, voice of God. And God said, Moses, Moses. He called him by name, and he asked Moses to take his shoes off because the place that he was standing was holy ground. Moses knew right away that this was the voice of the living God. So he took his sandals off and he bowed before God, and then God and Moses began to have a conversation. They began to talk back and forth with each other. God let Moses know that, hey, this is who I am. I'm the God of all the men you've learned about from your Hebrew life, of Abraham and Isaac. I'm that same God, the God of the universe. And I'm coming to talk to you today because I've seen what's happening with the Hebrew people, and it breaks my heart. I don't want them to be in slavery anymore. I want to set them free. And Moses, you're the guy that I'm choosing to help set the Hebrew people free. Now it was Moses' turn to talk, and he said, sure, God, can't wait, let's do it. No, if you know the story, that's not how Moses responded. Moses said, God, I think you might have the wrong guy. I don't know if you remember what happened when I was in Egypt, but it wasn't a good situation. I actually had to run away because people were so angry with me, and the Hebrew people don't like me, and the Egyptian people don't like me. I'm definitely the wrong guy for this job. And God went back and said, no, Moses, you're the person who I've chosen, and everything you need in this journey, I'll give you. And then Moses said, okay, but I'm actually not really good at speaking. Every time I speak, I trip on my words. I don't think anyone will listen to me. Listen, I've lived in the palace, and I've heard how these royal people speak, and I just don't speak like that anymore. I've been out here in Midian for over 40 years, and it's just, that's my old life. I can't go back there. And God said, I'll send someone to help you speak well. Everything you need, I'll give you. Moses, do you trust me? Do you trust that this is what I have for you? And in that moment, Moses had a decision to make, a decision to trust God and believe what God was saying to him with his own mouth, or stay in the life that he had grown comfortable with. And we're going to pause the story right there, and we'll get to hear a little bit later what Moses decided to do. But the conversation that God and Moses has had changed his whole life. It actually changed the life of everybody to come, because if the Hebrew people were never set free, what would the rest of the world look like? So this was the most important conversation Moses had ever had between him and God. Now there's a special word for conversation between God and people. Does anyone know what that word is? That's right, prayer. I'm going to put that word right up on the screen. It's prayer. Prayer is simply a conversation between you and God. Now, sometimes prayer can feel like really scary and you don't know what to say to God, or maybe you never hear God speak back to you, but we are going to take some time in our small groups to really learn about what prayer is and how we can have conversations with God, and in those conversations hear how God can give us a calling for our lives just like he did with Moses. So I cannot wait to hear about what you guys learn about having conversations in prayer with God. So you can find your teacher, head into your small groups, and we'll see you back here in a couple minutes.